Today, I had a great conversation with Dr. Nirav Pandya, a resident of Oakland, California. He is the chief of pediatric orthopedic surgery at UCSF and the director of pediatric sports medicine at Children's Hospital Oakland. He received his MD from the University of Chicago, and he's also an avid NBA fan. So his analyses of player injuries and his perspectives on the NBA in general are followed by tens of thousands of people on social media. So he's not only a great doctor, but he's also a great contributor to our basketball community. So please enjoy this conversation. How's your day been?
So good. I had just some surgeries today. Not too bad today.
Sounds good. I guess just to start things off, what are your thoughts on the Warriors game in an hour?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I think they have the players and the capability to win. If they turn the ball over a lot or Curry's cold, I'm a little bit worried about it just because the Grizzlies they're so athletic. But I think they understand the importance of the game. And I think Butler makes a big difference. That team starts getting a little bit out of control. Butler can calm it down and shoot free throws and things like that. So I think we'll be okay. I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, I agree. Scary. Butler took a hit at the Clippers game towards the end. I guess like building off of that, I don't go on Twitter or I don't go on X that much, but sometimes I do. And I often see some of your posts where you analyze player injuries. And I guess I had a quick question about that.
Yeah.
Do you get that information do you watch the plays in slow-mo and then decide, or is it from like the media, or what's the process of like building out those posts?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are a couple people who do this kind of on X a lot. And there's one group of people who analyze the videos and be like, oh, this could be the injury, and they try to predict it. And I really try to stay away from that because you really can't diagnose what their injury is based off the video. Like you can say, oh, here are the possibilities or what the team may do to work it up. What I try to stick with, especially since I'm not examining these players, I don't take care of them, is based on whatever the media reports, I'll then break it down. What does this mean for a player? So they say Stephen Curry has a thumb injury or he has a ligament injury in his thumb. I'll say, okay, this is what we do for this injury. This is what it means. Here are the general things that you look for in terms of return to play. So I try to give it like more an overview almost of kind of what's going on. And then there are another group of people who want to predict it within 5 minutes of what exactly the injury the player may have. And I don't think there's any benefit in that. I really like to try to break it down for the sports fan who here's from the Warriors. This is what the team reports. Here's some basic information about it. And this is what it could mean. And I really try to stay away from being like, they're going to come back in exactly 3 days. Try to keep it more fan friendly than anything else. And a lot of that kind of started when Clay tore his Achilles. I really wasn't doing too much on social media until that injury happened. And there was people who were talking about Achilles and there was all this like misinformation about what it meant and what it would mean for his career. So I did a little short video explaining it. And then after that video, it just started bowling balled after that and started doing more and more of this. And I'm watching sports anyway. I'm going to be on social media talking about it. So I figured this was another way to bring my expertise on as opposed to just being just a fan. So I grew out of that.
No, yeah, it's really cool how like you combine the medical aspects of your career with your passion for basketball and contribute to the NBA community. It's really amazing to see.
Yeah, no, awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
To start things off, I had a question for you, which is what's the most stereotypically American thing you love doing the most and most stereotypically Indian thing that you can't avoid?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think sports, and this is going back to me growing up. My parents immigrated here from India. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and I was one of the few Indian kids like in the area where I grew up. And for me, the way that I felt that I could fit in was being a sports fan. That's what that's what my dad did as well too. So we'd watch football, we'd like cheer, we'd yell, we do all those things that are big in US culture, which is being a sports fan. And 20, 30 years ago, it was a very specific demographic that was big into sports. Like it definitely was. People had been here for generations. And I think that kind of carried into it. So I've become that, if you want to quote unquote say that stereotypical American sports fan who yells at the TV, wears jerseys all the time and is really like into their team and that they live and die by their team. I think that would probably be one of the more stereotypical quote unquote American things that I do. I think one of the stereotypical Indian things that I can't avoid is really like looking at the science and math of things a lot, like using the general term for those of us whose parents immigrated here and were physicians, doctors, or lawyers, like obviously that ethic of studying in science and math. So when I'm watching something or I'm watching a sports thing or doing something, I'm like, what's the science behind that? What's the math behind that? What's like the more deeper dive into it? I find that being like the more stereotypical thing is like, it's just not enjoying the sports. I'm trying to look for the value of it educational wise for whether it be my kids or the fans or things like that.
Yeah, so the stereotypical like Indian STEM kind of vibe with being a huge sports fan. That's really cool. I guess, or no, yeah, continue.
Yeah, no, I think that really was for my generation of those of us who are in our 40s. We're still that generation of the parents who immigrated here, who came in the 50s and 60s when, they were allowing just professionals in. That was such a huge part of how a lot of our parents, quote unquote, made it in this country before their relatives came, was like this emphasis on science and math and engineering, and you go into law. So it was like this joke that your parents wanted to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer. That was it. Like that was your choice. And that kind of trickled down in the way that potentially why I went into medicine, and why my wife, who's a lawyer, went into that. But I think now we're seeing that change a lot. Like my kids could do something completely different, but it doesn't matter to me. But that definitely does. It definitely was a huge part of how I was brought up. Even though my parents always said you can do whatever you want, I really knew that they wanted me to go into medicine or go into engineering, because that's how they succeeded when they were in India. So they felt that was the template for them when they came here.
No, yeah, I totally get that. And more on like cultural misunderstandings and stereotypes and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
tell me about the most awkward cultural misunderstanding you've experienced that you can like laugh about now.
Yeah, absolutely. It actually piggybacks on sports. When you're growing up, Little League was like a huge thing. Like speaking of things that everyone does when they're growing up. Little League, where I grew up in Chicago, everyone in my community, like not Indian, who lived in the neighborhood, was like, oh, you got to join the Little League team. My parents had no idea what baseball was. So the first Little League practice, I came with a cricket bat. And all I'd watched, no one was playing cricket. So I come up there, I go up to bat with my cricket bat. I'm getting laughed at. Like all I know how to pitch is how you throw a cricket ball. So I go up there and run and throw your cricket pitch. And then kids were like making fun of me. I felt horrible. I think someone even pushed me, like little things that you don't get when you do something differently. And looking back at it, I was like, wow, I laugh at it because it seems so funny now that if you were to do that now, people would be like, oh, what's this cricket bat? It's pretty cool. Tell me about cricket. But back in like the 80s, it was like, oh, geez, what are you doing? You're this Indian kid who's trying to play this, very American sport, and you're bringing your Indian game over. What is this? It was one of those kind of things that sticks with my childhood of, okay, I'm interested in sports. I want to do sports, but there's going to be this barrier that I have to go over because people didn't assume that kids who look like me back in the 80s and 90s could play sports, especially with team sports, because it was really difficult. No matter how good you were, people would look at you and say, go study. That's what you are. You're an Indian kid, go study, be good at math and science and become a doctor, but you're not allowed in this world of sport. So I think that was one of those first moments very early at a young age, at 6 and 7, where I realized that, hey, there's going to be something different that I'm experiencing.
No, yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah. So are you a bigger cricket fan or basketball, would you say?
Basketball, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I still follow cricket a lot, just casually, but I think part of it is just like basketball was so growing up in Chicago. I grew up in the era of Jordan, which kind of see him enter the league and win all those championships. So basketball is a huge part of me being in Chicago. So still follow cricket when the big matches are on. I'll turn them on and watch. But basketball is my passion. Like that's really what, of all the sports, obviously I played different sports in college, but basketball as a fan is really what really is part of my heart. Yeah.
No, yeah, totally. Wait, so Warriors or Bulls?
So that's a loaded question for me. The Warriors, with now because we moved out here and my kids were born out in California, the Warriors have really become like my family's team. And obviously, I'm a huge Warriors fan now. I still follow the Bulls, but it's been so long since that era when not just when they were winning, but like Jordan and Pippen and Rodman, that era. It's like a totally different team. I've not lived in Chicago for almost 20 years. So I think the Warriors, if you ask me what my number one team is, it's the Warriors. But my childhood team, I still look fondly back on those Bulls teams.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a fun question. If your life had a soundtrack, what Indian song and what
Wow.
American song would be playing during like the key moments of your life?
Oh, that's a good song. So I would say Indian song. I was Bhangra was really big. Even though I'm Gujarati, Bhangra was really big when I was in college, and there was a lot of parties and stuff. So Tunuk Tunuk by Dalar Mehndi would probably be the Indian song. It's a very popular Bhangra song. So I think that is kind of like the energy of it, the chaos. I think that kind of describes training and medicine and having kids and Bay Area and things like that. For an American song that kind of soundtrack of my life, I'm a big kind of old school hip hop fan. So Tribe Called Quest is a big hip hop group that's my favorite group. I would say their song Scenario kind of goes through all the various things that can happen in life. I think that would be the soundtrack, the American soundtrack of my life. Yeah.
That's actually a great comparison with the medical, like the chaos of that.
Yeah.
And that's so I guess what's moving on to a little bit more serious now. What's the craziest thing you've done to hide or downplay your Indian identity like in the past? And how do you feel about that now?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I look back a lot on a little bit more like in my middle school and elementary school days, and even maybe a little bit of high school, where I went out of my way to almost show I wasn't Indian. because like I wanted to be with the cool kids. I wanted to have a girlfriend, and I was the only Indian kid or like one of two Indian kids in this huge high school in Chicago where I grew up in Chicago. I went out of my way to be like, oh, I'm not like one of those other Indian kids, or I don't have Indian food when I go home, or for a while I was eating all kinds of meat and things like that to fit in. A big thing was like I was trying to prove that I was just like someone who'd been here for generations. And I think I really got to the point in high school where I realized that I'd spent all these years trying to prove that I was something that I wasn't, and who I was because of the way my parents grew me up, raised me, and how I grew up. So rather than trying to suppress the Indianness of who I was proud of it. Like, this is what I was. This is the language that we spoke at home. This is what we ate at home. This is what like my relatives were. We went to India, things like that, and really leaned into it. And I think that identity started forming more as I got further and further in high school. And then when I went off to college at University of Chicago, I think that really was, okay, I really want to dive deep and look at my background and my culture in a more kind of deeper fashion. And I became, not besides biology, I was also a South Asian studies major. So I think a lot of that was, okay, me coming back to who I was and studying a little bit more deeply. And one of the things I also was that kind of helps spur this was I also was a DJ both in high school, throughout med school and college. And I did a lot of American parties and nightclubs as well too. But during the time I was growing up, there were a lot of kind of these, they called them Desi parties or Indian parties that would happen in Chicago where I was growing up, and where I'd be sitting there playing American music and then playing Indian music as well too, and seeing everything come before me. Like, here I am doing something that's very American, which is being a DJ, playing hip hop and Chicago house music, but then also incorporating in Indian music in this club full of all Indian people who are all like battling with their identity as well too, and embraced it. This is who I was, and these were a group of people who were going through the same thing as me. So I think it definitely was one of those things when I was younger that I was like, I have to hide this. I have to suppress this. Not because people were making fun of me or people were like attacking me for the most part because of this, but because I felt by suppressing that was how people were going to accept me, when in fact I wasn't really being my true self. Like, I think that's what really made people want to accept me, because I was trying to be who I was, not someone I wasn't. So I think that really solidified for me as I got in high school and early into college.
Yeah, that's great. So like embracing your culture. It's like, so moving on from that, or adding on to that, I guess like how's your Indian American has been like a secret superpower in like your career and your life,
Yeah.
in your relationships?
Yeah, I think having to navigate these two cultures, and you got this American culture, you got your Indian culture, you've got your parents, you've got your kids. I'm trying to raise my kids with certain parts of culture. Like, you do have to navigate a lot of different spaces. So I think that definitely has kind of given me a little, not, I would say, more resiliency, because you're not just dealing with the difficulties of how hard it is to work or raise kids, but you're also dealing with navigating this culture and then how people look at you as well too. So I think that's given me definitely a lot of resiliency. It's a lot of things to rub off my shoulder as well too. I think I'm more willing, if something happens, to be like, look, I'm just going to move on, keep going. And you look back and you kind of look back at how my parents were and things that you noticed that I didn't really know about, kind of some of the struggles that they had coming here, that I now look back and say, oh, wow, like they were doing this, they were doing that. So I think it is a little bit of a superpower to have to navigate these different spaces. And on the Bay Area is one big melting pot as well, too. You're trying to like then figure out, how do I do this in the context of the Bay Area versus like in other parts of the country? I think it just gives you more perspective and allows you to see things in different ways that just helped me in my medical career being a father as well, too.
Yeah. So I guess what's something that like your non-Indian friends have been fascinated about relating to like Indian culture, like something in your home or like a tradition you have?
Yeah, I think a lot of times around the holidays, whether it be Diwali or Holi, or for us, because I'm Gujarati, like Garba, I think people are just fascinated that this concept is very basic, but how colorful and vibrant certain parts of Indian culture are. I think people in general, because they have limited interaction, or the interaction they're getting is on TV, or they're seeing, or they have a certain stereotype of what Indian American should be. When they see the vibrancy, the color, the energy, the fun, the like community, I think people are definitely very surprised by that. Because I think for the most part, people still, even though there's so many different socioeconomic statuses and people and within the Indian American community, I think people for the most part, when they see someone Indian, they still stereotype them as a STEM person, especially in the Bay Area. I think that's the case. So when they see us in another environment, another way, celebrating who we are and our culture, I think that really surprises a lot of people, because they don't see that. They don't see that on TV. They don't see that on the internet. So I think that's something that really does surprise people a lot.
Yeah, I think like just being stuck between two different worlds. I think you explained that perfectly when you talked about like your hobby DJing, when you combine like house music with more like Indian music. That's a good way to show the people that, or make Indian people feel more like comfortable
Right.
in like these two different identities that like they're trying to grapple between.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess so. If there's one thing that you could like magically just make every American understand about Indian culture,
Yeah.
what would you make that be?
I think the big thing is that India is such a diverse place. I think there's people, a lot of people have their, and part of it's just the way we portray ourselves in the media, the way we interact in the world, that there's such a diversity of just what India is, the different people of India, different languages. And also, I think most importantly in the United States is just, as I mentioned before, there's so many different socioeconomic groups and statuses. There are poor Indians, there are rich Indians, there are Indians who are struggling with all the problems that we see in America as well, too. So I think just understanding that we're not just a certain culture. Like I have issues with quote unquote the model minority. Like that's like what Indians sometimes were crafted as or portrayed as, and that is a disservice to what our community has gone through, the various parts of our community. So I think that's really the key thing, is that we're just not. You can't sum up India in 5 sentences or 5 words. Like you go to India, if you've ever visited India, you see it. Like it's like you go 100 miles away. It's a totally different culture. It's a totally different language. It's a totally different place.
Diverse, yeah.
It's super diverse. And you come here in America, and then everyone else has a different experience based on where you grow up. So I think it's just understanding that there's a lot more to someone who comes in and has an Indian American last name or appears Indian than meets the eye. It's not just a stereotype. We're dealing with a lot of the same things that everyone else is. Plus, then you throw in navigating another culture, and it's different. There's so many different shades of who we are, both physically, obviously, but also more spiritually and emotionally.
Yeah. So which of those stereotypes about Indian culture makes you laugh the most? Or what's like the most like silliest like misconception that people have?
Yeah, I think it's, and you know this because you're like, everyone says, oh, you go home and eat curry, right? That's like the big thing. It's like curry. First of all, there isn't like curry, right? You don't go home and mom made curry for me today. And it is funny how people say, oh, I had great curry. I had Indian food last night. I'm like, there's so many seasonings, so many spices, so much part of what makes Indian food. There's so many different things. So I think I always find it funny where people are like, oh man, I really, really want some Indian food. Give me some, I want some curry. Or then they'll be like, I want the chicken tikka masala. And they think that's all that Indian food is. So I think that's one of the stereotypes that I think I always chuckle inside. I'm like, yeah, it's not just curry. There's so much, just like with our people. The food is complex. There's so many spices and stuff that goes into it. And it's not just here's your vegetables and we all have this one basic sauce that we all put in there for everyone to eat.
Yeah, it's my mom will make Indian food like almost every day for dinner.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had a plate and it's been called like curry.
Exactly. Like, it's crazy. Yeah, I know.
I guess. So you mentioned how like your grandparents are from India, your parents grew up there and then came here. I guess what's something that like not even your parents or just like an elder in your community has said that like perfectly captures the experience of immigrating to another country in just a few words?
Yeah. I think it's the struggle. I think for a lot of us growing up as kids, like especially just the way immigration patterns were, and like the first group of immigrants that came here, besides obviously the Sikhs who were building the railroads in California in the 1890s, they're basically just professionals, right? So like for us growing up, it's like everyone we grew up with, they're all doctors, they're doing great, they're lawyers, they're doing great, they're engineers, they're doing great. And we forget as kids, because our parents are working so hard and they're financially doing well, the struggle that they had to come here. Like it really isn't. People always say I came here with $5 in my pocket, but a lot of them did. They came here with little money. They worked at hospitals or worked with law firms where they were like in horrible areas. They kept working, they kept saving so that we could have an opportunity for them. And what they talk about is not just the struggle financially, the struggle of trying to fit into a new culture, the struggle of not having community to talk to. My parents come here and yeah, they maybe know 2 or 3 other people, and then they open up the phone book and look for someone else who has an Indian last name to try to connect with them. So I think it was all those little steps they made to make a community. And then you see these huge areas that have tons of Indian people. You've got the Bay Area, you've got Chicago, you've got Edison, New Jersey. It's like Fremont. We're just like these huge communities of Indian people came together to support one another. So I think what really sticks with me is how when people came here, how much they supported each other, even when they didn't know each other. And I think that was really something that was huge and allowed a lot of people to succeed, is that it really truly was quote unquote a community. And it wasn't just, I go to my friend's house and have tea. It was like, this person's going to let me stay here for 4 weeks until I find an apartment, or they're going to employ me at my job. And that trickled down as then our family members came, and then the next generation came, et cetera, where that sense of community stayed there. So I think that's really key, is that if we look at it from the outside, it's like, yeah, you've got a nice car, they've got a nice job, your kids went to college, but all that struggle that they had to get us to that point, I think they just didn't want to talk about it because we were at a different phase in life. But you look back and you hear these stories, you're like, oh, wow, this truly was a struggle. And a lot of it was luck. For every 10 people who made it, there were 5 who didn't because they couldn't make it. They had to go back to India. So I think part of it's luck, part of it's just the struggle, part of it's how important it was for them to allow us to succeed as children. So I think a lot of that really resonates with me now, more so than my dad made sure that when I was driving, he bought me a car or things like that. It's like the struggle that he had to do to get there so he could give us these opportunities.
No, yeah, totally. And I think from what I've seen scrolling through social media is that one of the most common forms of anti-Indianness is like these pictures of like Indian people at a university in like Canada or the UK. And they're like,
Yeah,
oh, they're just coming here. But I don't think people understand that it's not just like a horde of people that get shipped into another country.
right,
It's a lifetime struggle to get a great opportunity. And
right.
it's way more nuanced than what people paint it out to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what also a lot of people don't realize is just how difficult it is also in India. Like I think for a lot of people, like they seem, oh, you came here because you couldn't make it in India. But like in India, you take one test. And if you're not in the top 1%, then you can't become a doctor. You can't become a lawyer. You can't do those things. So you're taking people who are then deciding to, okay, I'm going to come here, take a cultural risk, take a risk where they know there's going to be discrimination against you. People are going to look at you a certain way, and then try to make it in a country where you don't know anyone. It's pretty remarkable that a lot of people will knock on people who are H-1B visa workers who are working in Silicon Valley, or people who are coming here to get that opportunity. And it's not just like you get on a plane and then you just get off and everything's great. It's like there's a lot of struggles and steps to go halfway across the world to try to establish a life here.
Yeah, I think part of that is painting like immigrants as like extremely foreign and deviated from US culture. But I want people to understand that while like several like different types of immigrants might look different or sound different, a lot of us still have the same values that America stands for. And that's
Yeah.
probably why we're here in the first place.
Yeah. I think everyone I think comes here because they feel that coming here gives them an opportunity to achieve whatever the way their life they want their life to be. And I think that is rooted in what a lot of people see as America now as a place where people can come and prosper if there's more opportunities for them from where they may be. And that's for Indian people, it's for people from China, people from Japan, people from Africa. Like it's all I think there's that commonality that actually binds us more together, but people have a tendency to forget that because they look at more of the superficial things as opposed to looking what really roots into why people are choosing to make that decision. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And like you mentioned, your struggle with that growing up as like
Yeah.
an Indian American in Chicago. What was like a that's not how we do it in my house moment that you had when you like went to a friend's house or something that really made you understand like the difference?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of it was just the way we interacted with our parents. I think that even, and I still that carries down to within my family as well too now, is just the way you interacted with your parents. It was a much more of a formal, respectful kind of relationship. I think that's just the way it is in India culturally, and that's the way kind of my parents were. And I'd go over to my friend's house who weren't Indian, and just the way they interacted with their parents, how casual they were, how they talk back to them. It was just like, no, we don't. That's not how we do in India. I don't remember ever in my life talking back to my father. He told me something, I would listen. I talked to my mom, I would listen because that's just culturally how things were in India when you came here. So for me, it was like just the casualness with which people talk with their parents, like how they were almost friends with their parents. And obviously, I've developed that relationship over time with my parents, but it was just a very kind of, whoa, that's very different for what I'm used for. Like what parenting and what raising a child is was, at least for that generation of Indian parents, wasn't necessarily you're becoming their friend or you're becoming someone who's going to be like a lifelong like confidant for you. It was like, I'm bringing you here so that you have an opportunity to succeed financially and educationally. And that's my job. And it was very different. And I think there are lots of problems with that mindset as well too. So I think it is definitely interesting, kind of just like the way our interaction with our parents were as well too. And also they were strict. Like they were much stricter than some of my friends. Like couldn't go out at night, couldn't date, things like that until we were much older.
Totally. I guess like wrapping things up,
Yeah.
what if you could sit down with like your 16-year-old junior in
Yeah.
high school
Right.
self
Yeah.
for like
Yeah.
coffee,
Yeah.
what would be the key piece of advice you would give them?
Yeah, I would say embrace who you are. Understand that things can be difficult for you at certain points. You're going to have to. You don't want to not ignore like who you are and understand some of the struggles that you have because of it, but at the same point, be proud of it. So you don't want to get in the position where you're like, oh, geez, look at all these things. These are all these barriers to me. Why I can't do certain things. You have to be like, look, this is what's in front of me, and I'm going to try to overcome it. I'm going to try to dispel those stereotypes. And I think more than anything else, it's not even just dispelling them or advocating for yourself. It's internally just being proud of who you are, whatever that is. Like you can't change who your parents are. You can't change the way you grew up. You can't change what your culture. It's being embracing it and then using that to navigate through the world. And I think that's something that I would tell my 16-year-old self more. And so rather than trying to change who I was, embracing who I was, and then taking who I was and planting myself in this culture that we are right now, and then just living my life. And I feel like I did that when I got to college. But I feel that my first 14, 15, 16 years of my life, I was trying to change who I was just to fit in, which didn't allow me to succeed in the way that I wanted to.
So yeah, so like we're all born with like our own culture, our own
Yeah.
talents, our own like
Yeah.
interests and passions.
Yeah.
Instead of
Right.
trying to like avoid it or try to not be embarrassed,
Yeah.
just embrace it as who you
Yeah.
are and
Yeah.
let it help you succeed.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the embarrassment, right? I think that's the thing is like, I think I spent a lot of time embarrassed growing up when I was younger and wishing, even certain points in my life, particularly in early middle school, I was wishing I wasn't Indian, right? Because I couldn't fit in. I wasn't like everyone else. I was different and people were noticing that. And if I would have told myself back then, I'd be like, that's ridiculous. I would have told myself to wake up and this is who you are, be proud of it. And I think that once you're proud and you're self-confident in who you are, it allows you to be an advocate for your community. It allows you to help other people and it allows you to be the best person that you can be without constantly trying to push aside who you really are.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah. Actually, last question. Who's your NBA GOAT?
Oh, Curry by far. Curry, I'll say it this way. Jordan, I still think is the best player ever, in NBA. But I think Jordan was great. But there are a lot of players who could, on individual nights or certain periods of time, do what Jordan did. But what Jordan was able to do longitudinally over the course of his career was amazing. Curry, I think, is the skill GOAT because there is no one in NBA history who can do what he can do. And there's no one in the current NBA who can even remotely come close to that. No one has been able to shoot 3-pointers like he can at his size. So do I think there will ever be another person who has a skill set like Curry? I don't think so. He's just like one in a million. Like no one, I think, Trae Young is the closest and he's not even close. But then if you look at Jordan was amazing because of his tenacity, what he was able to do for so many years. And he was very athletic. But you can see other players who kind of mimic parts of his game, the Kobe's, even LeBron to a certain extent. But no one in history you can say is Steph Curry in terms of what he does. So that's my kind of.
I think people understate how scary Curry is because he has 4 defenders on him every game. Just like,
yeah, it's crazy. And then and he's shooting. He's like making these shots with 0.2 seconds like of reaction time to get an opening and his size to it. It's remarkable. And I think people forget that because they don't go out and shoot 3-pointers. So I think that if you go out and like actually try to make a 3, it's hard when you're wide open. And then you can imagine he's just doing it with like huge guys on him when he's fatigued and tired and like hitting these crazy shots. It's pretty remarkable. Yeah.
No, yeah, I completely agree with you. If someone asked me who's the GOAT, I'm definitely saying Steph Curry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't think, LeBron's great. He's good. LeBron's a physical specimen. He can do things, but Curry, based on skill alone, it's just remarkable. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for chatting with me, Dr. Pandya. This was a really good conversation.
Absolutely no problem. My kids are big fans of yours. They always talk about it. We saw Shub on campus. So there you go.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night. Thank you so much. Bye.